The United States-Indonesia bilateral relationship stands as amongst the gateways for US-based firms to expand and have further access within the Southeast Asian 682 million population market. It has also stood as one of the best Asian nations to invest in today, as Indonesia has emerged to have a great foreign policy towards international investments within national borders. And so, data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis shows that the United States of America had been amongst the largest sources of foreign direct investments within Indonesia, placing capital from about $1.9 billion in 1990 to increasingly at large by 2009 at $5 billion, and ending with the recent data in 2020, close to $10 billion. After all, this figurative investment data is directly influenced by the US role within the region of ASEAN, as it stands as the #1 biggest investor in the entire world. Far more than Japan and China combined, two nations that are renowned for being top sources of foreign direct investments within the region. Furthermore, the US-Indonesia bilateral trade accounts for one of the largest within Indonesia. The United States government reports that in 2021, the two nations had a combined bilateral trade of about $37 billion, a trade figure that grew from only $8 billion way back in 1995. These so-called investments, on the other hand, have been in large parts directed towards Indonesia's manufacturing industry throughout the past 3 decades, with the most recent years seeing a rapid increase within the information technology field in Indonesia. Whereas the exportation of Indonesian goods going into the US is largely thanks to the abundance of rubber, palm oil, and seafood. Not limited to it, however, as they also export a ton of finished goods to the US. Why Indonesia was chosen by the US as a grand destination for trade partnerships and investments is attributed to many. We could say it is because of the abundance of natural resources, talent, and even the massive population market, and the nation that is slated to become one of Asia's next emerging economies. To truly understand all of these, however, we must likewise go back to the two nations' historical moments. When the Dutch were still occupying Indonesia way back then, the US had actually played a major role in demanding that Indonesia be set free from the tight hands of the European nation. This was largely because the US wanted Indonesia to avoid being in contact with communism, burdensome trouble back in the Cold War. This helped shape Indonesia to become one of the most pro-US nations in Asia, as views from the two nations helped shape investments, trade, and technology transfers throughout the decades that followed, after their official diplomatic relations were established in 1949. As Indonesia was still struggling with numerous local conflicts, the US had opened its borders to Indonesian refugees, which helped the general population to be further US-leaning, as the American country was seen as a friendly nation to some. This opened up Indonesia's earliest migration, which by the 21st century had numbered around 113,000, and to grow further as ancestral ties had seen across other Asian ethnicities. Due to these internal conflicts, the US-Indonesian relationship drifted apart, significantly when then-President Sukarno changed his views around the mid-1960s, when he and his government had gone closer to China. This marked the moment that the US lost Indonesia, but the rise of Suharto, however, drove Indonesia back to the US, which helped further strengthen relations between the two nations henceforth. The establishment of the Intergovernmental Group on Indonesia, or IGGI for short, in 1967 has been winning foreign assistance to Indonesia, as the largest funder of this came from the US. This was created to help Indonesia curb its international debt outstanding, which in 1966 was estimated to be about $2.7 billion. From 1967 to 1972, in just 5 short years, the US had donated close to $900 million. Far more than the second largest, which was Japan, at only $550 million, whereas the majority of which had helped produce the agricultural economy of Indonesia. These investments would continue on as the two groups of donors, the other known as the Consultative Group on Indonesia, would help Indonesia's economy. From 1967 to 2003, these donations would total to over $111 billion, a massive amount that has helped lift Indonesia's economy to today. By the dawn of the 21st century, the two nations' relations were reaching all-time highs, with a survey done in 2002 showing that over 61% of Indonesians view the US favorably. Throughout the coming 2 decades would be, however, a declining factor in Indonesia. Despite continuous aid from the United States, and improvement especially within the education sector of Indonesia, in the general population of Indonesia with 2011, only 54% of the population see approval from the US. Furthermore, a study done by the US Global Leadership Report would also see that only 21% of the population is in approval of US leadership, which further marks Indonesia's skepticism of the United States as a whole is in decline. But this had not stopped the continuous investments, continuous trade agreements, and even military cooperation of the two nations. Especially in 2010, the US officially lifted the ban on military contacts with Kopassus, the Special Forces Command of Indonesia's army. The year 2000 until today has in fact been the biggest source of foreign developments between the two. The total cumulative stock investments that stand within Indonesia today marks over $18.7 billion. This was in huge parts thanks to Indonesia's growing economic market, which has seen quite a fundamental boost as of late. According to data gathered by the United Nations, shows that the US had even done major mergers and acquisitions in Indonesia over recent years, with one large happening when US-based Kimberly-Clark purchased SoftX Indonesia for a whopping $1.2 billion, and expansions of US firm Travel Wi-Fi has also seen a boost, as it finally enters Indonesia as a provider of mobile Wi-Fi solutions. Even the tensions generated by China and the US have seen several giant US firms shifting from China to ASEAN, one destination mainly in Indonesia. The US has also played key roles in helping build out the infrastructure ambition of Indonesia, a notable happening in the nation today, with them helping finance or construct infrastructures, like the $2.9 billion Paranop dimethyether plant. What is most profound is the big investments and potential of data centers within Indonesia. Giant US-based firms have helped push Indonesia to become Southeast Asia's second-largest data center destination, with more than 22 owned by foreigners. These are pushed by Amazon with their AWS services, which have pushed over $1 billion of investments within a 9-year time frame. They along with Microsoft and IBM Cloud. Further, on military cooperations, we are seeing a grand boost as Indonesia's need for further military developments has come about, where Indonesia had purchased a whopping $13.9 billion deal to buy 36 F-15 Eagle heavyweight fighters from the US, a move that will help reshape the nation's capabilities, and a sign that Indonesia is emerging with the world as it expands its military interests further. Without regard to the United States' role in the latest crisis, on the other hand, the American nation had become the leading source of vaccine donors to Indonesia, providing more than 35 million doses, topping up nearly $1 billion worth of healthcare assistance over the past 2 decades. The US and Indonesia have incredibly done so well with each other in the most important sector of the world. The future of the two nations, although a separate issue, as it cannot really be predicted, is surely going to go well, especially the fact that Indonesia today is playing a huge role in the coming decades of the Asian century. The US, which is keen on investing in the third-largest democratic country, is presumably a must-do so. Even the current President Joe Biden of the US had established renewed focus, as the two still share profound visions of having a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. With the current chairman of G20, as well, which is Joko Widodo, surely there will be a continued presence of US-Indonesian relations in the coming years. But anyway, what do you think Indonesian-US relations are going to be like in the future?